Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about laziness, why you are lazy. People often say, oh, I'm just lazy. They'll use that as an excuse to not do something. Really, it's a way to protect yourself, and we may get to that. But it's not who you are. It's simply how you've adapted. Nobody is born lazy. No child is lazy. Yes, children don't do work in the traditional sense, but play is work for children. So, when a child wants to work on her skills with scissors, for instance, she'll wake up in the morning and go right to working on her scissors. She won't even want to eat breakfast. No child is lazy. You've adapted. You've learned how to be lazy. Very similar when people say they're introverts or extroverts. That's not who you are. That's simply how you've adapted. Oh, you're an introvert. You don't like being around people. That means you have anxiety around people. It's not who you are. That's an adaptation. Saying you're an introvert is a way you can protect yourself from being around people more often. Laziness is a symptom, right? Laziness is not the cause. Laziness is not who you are. It is step 4 of a 5-stage process. The 5-stage process of neurosis, what it generally is. And it's the same for everybody. Laziness is step 4, saying you're lazy, and then step 5 is the belief. You're lazy, which is different enough to merit its own step. And so the conventional wisdom around what to do or how to combat laziness, here we can see why it doesn't really work, because it goes right to not the cause, but the symptom. And, people say things like, well, generally, the wisdom around what to do for laziness, it's kind of true, because people will say, oh, you need a system, you need a schedule, you need some kind of routine that you can submit to. And while that is true, again, you're just working on the symptoms. So people say things like, oh, you got to work out, or even work, do some kind of work technique, like some Pomodoro technique. I mean, essentially, the solution to being unable to work is to do more work, or to treat the belief that you're lazy. Supposedly, people say, "Oh, you got to do affirmations." And I'm not saying any of these things are wrong to do, but we got to be honest and say, it's really not the laziness itself. It's really not the cause of the laziness. You can take a fever reducer if you have the flu, and it will reduce the fever, but the fever is just a symptom. And I get it. If you have an important sales meeting, you need to take Dayquil to get you through that meeting. I get it, but we got to be honest, and you're not working on, you're not treating the flu. In fact, the fever is your body's attempt to fight the virus. So in order to manage laziness well, or really get at the root of it, we got to look at the cause. And the cause, well, the first step is individuation. There is some drive within you. I'm saying individuation, right? Because my main influence is Jung. I think there's some drive within you, some impulse, some emotion, some intuition, some intuitive urge that takes all of your sensory, psychological perceptions and evaluations in your life up until that point, and kind of spits back to you a general, what's the next right thing to do for you, given the situation that you're in. But sometimes that drive for individuation, it tells you to do something uncomfortable, or that would maybe cause more anxiety than you feel already. So what do is we repress it. And then if you repress your drive to individuation, you are necessarily isolated. You isolate, and when you isolate, you feel shame. And when I say isolate, I don't mean you're not around people. You could be around people and isolated, but you'll feel isolated around people if you feel like you need to repress whatever your drive for individuation is to be around them, and that will inevitably cause shame, given enough iterations of that repression. So this shows us that what we really need to do to combat laziness is we need to work on these 3 steps. And then steps 4 and 5 will generally take care of themselves. And in fact, working on steps 4 and 5 without addressing steps 1 through 3 will it may work short term, but it's going to leave you more frustrated because the laziness, the belief that you're lazy is going to keep coming. You can give yourself all the affirmations in the world that you need to not be lazy. If you're still mismanaging your emotions that cause laziness in the first place, you're still going to be lazy. I mean, think of it like a computer, right? If your computer is already running at 50% capacity and your boss comes around and gives you a task that takes 25% of your brain psychological capacity, it's going to feel like 75%. Everybody else is doing it at 25%, and you're going to look around and say, am I stupid? Am I lazy? Something's wrong with me. Oh, David Goggins says to wake up and run 10 miles every morning, or whatever it is he says. Which is fine to do if that's what you want to do, but in no way will it combat laziness. And so how do you deal with these first 3 steps? Well, there's a bunch of things you can do. It really depends on your individual. I mean, overall, this is your pattern. Hear me now. Believe me later. Himna bimla. But generally, this involves things like identify emotions. As lame as that sounds, it's true. Or what else does this involve? It involves some kind of communication. Or iron out any creases in communication that you have with the most important relationships in your life. That's really what that looks like. And there's a bunch of other things like group therapy, I think, can be an effective part of that. And so people will try to sell you a system to you got to submit to the system in order to overcome your laziness, which is kind of true, but really what you need to do is submit to a system that works on these 3 steps, and the laziness and the belief that you're lazy will take care of themselves. It will work every time. But you got to get good at identifying what these things are, right? I mean, there's that saying, life comes down to the choices that you make, which is of course true. Life comes down to the choices that you make. I mean, there's other influences, but fundamentally it's the choices that you make. But what matters more is the resolution on which you make those choices. You can spend all your energy making choices on step 4 and 5 here on the conscious symptom, by the way. Sorry about that dog barking. The nanny must be here. But really, you got to focus on you got to get your resolution. You got to put the right lens in your microscope to focus on what actually matters. So yeah, choices that you make, but on what resolution are you making those choices? If you're not looking at the right spot, if you have the flu and you're just focused on the fever, you're going to have a bad time. And this also answers the question, is it okay to use drugs? I get this question a bunch. Can I use drugs? Should I use Vyvanse or Adderall to help me? And I say, yeah, go ahead, use it. As long as it doesn't turn into a problem and you're not using more than you need to, or you're relying on it or anything like that, then use whatever drugs you need. As long as you're using drugs for these 3 stages here, the cause, then it will work itself out. You will find yourself needing that drug less and less over time, naturally, right? It becomes, it's like a self-extinction way. But if you use drugs on step 4 and 5, then you're just going to need more and more, and you're going to have a bad time. Muhammad Ali, he has that great quotation. I brought it before. It's one of those quotations. It seems just kind of simpler like any other quotation, but you can really think about it a long time, and it means more, I find, the more you think about it. And that quotation is, it's not the climb that bothers you. If you're climbing up a mountain, it's not the climb that's going to bother you. What's going to bother you is the pebble in your shoe. And that's my job. My job, you come to me as a client and you say, oh, look, Mark, I have all these problems in my life over here. And I say, yeah, you do have those problems. I'm not trying to gaslight you, but also at the same time, we need to focus on what's more fundamental. You don't have relationship problems. You don't have money problems. You don't have work problems. You don't have mother-in-law, wife, husband problems. You have psychological issues. You have ways that you mismanage your emotions. That's what steps 1 through 3 are. There are ways that you specifically mismanage emotions that leads to these problems in your life. And it's my job to say, yeah, let's take all that energy and just direct it a little bit. And this problem will work itself out. Let's take the pebble out of your shoe. It's actually quite simple to do, but it can still be difficult. So you may need some help. We do free consultations. Join animus.com/schedule. If you want to find out more about what I do. Thank you guys. And remember, you're not lazy. You simply don't know how to manage your emotions.